When Akin dropped off Tofunmi at Mama Fola's faded bungalow in Ikorodu, the street was quiet. Too quiet for Lagos. The boy stood with his box, watching his father drive away, unsure if this was temporary or forever. Mama Fola opened the gate slowly. Her eyes were soft, but something behind them didn't blink. "Come in, my dear," she said, holding out her arms. The compound smelled of camphor and rain. A carved wooden crucifix hung above the doorway. Inside, the TV buzzed with static beside an untouched bowl of pap. The walls were filled with old pictures, framed smiles from a time Tofunmi had never seen. At first, everything felt gentle. Mama Fola cooked okra soup with fish, just how he liked it. She braided his hair while humming gospel songs. She called him my light and tucked him in with prayers. "I lost my only child in that accident," she whispered one night, "but now God has returned him through you." Tofunmi smiled weakly, unsure what to say. He missed Surulere. He missed his mother's scent, the noise of Danfo buses, his school friends, the rooftop breeze at night. Mama Fola watched him too closely sometimes. She'd stand silently by the door or hold his face longer than necessary. Still, he said nothing. She had promised to care for him like her own. He believed her. Days turned into weeks, and Tofunmi's laughter faded into silence. Mama Fola's sweetness curdled slowly, like milk left too long under the sun. She was always watching, always touching, always near. At night, she sat by his bed, telling stories about her son, the one she lost in the accident. "You look just like him when you sleep," she'd whisper, brushing his hair back with trembling fingers. Sometimes she'd cry. Other times she'd sing lullabies he'd never heard before. When she hugged him, she didn't let go fast enough. One evening, after lights out, she came into his room without knocking. Her wrapper rustled softly, like secrets. Her breath was close, too close. "Don't be afraid," she said. "This is just between us. It's how I show love." Tofunmi froze, unsure if he was dreaming. His heart pounded like the generator outside. He wanted to scream, but the sound stayed locked in his throat. The next morning, she served him yam and egg, smiling like nothing had happened. "You're a good boy," she said. "You won't tell anyone, right?" He nodded, slowly. She kissed his forehead and laughed. "That's my sweet child." He didn't touch the yam. That night, he turned to the wall and stared at the cracks on the ceiling, counting each one like they might save him. And from that day on, he stopped looking at her the same way. Tofunmi tried to run once. He packed his clothes into a nylon bag, left before sunrise, and boarded a keke heading towards Surulere. The plan was simple: get to his father's office, wait at the gate, and beg to go home. But halfway there, the driver's phone rang. "I have one small boy here," the man said, glancing through the mirror. "He says he's going to Surulere alone." 10 minutes later, Mama Fola was waiting by the roadside, calm, silent. She didn't beat him. She didn't shout. She just smiled and whispered, "You don't leave the people who love you." That evening, she made amala and ewedu, extra meat in his plate. 2 weeks later, his world crumbled. Akin and his wife were returning from a wedding in Abeokuta when the trailer lost its brakes. They were crushed under a container, dead on the spot. Mama Fola screamed loud enough for the whole street to hear. But when she turned to Tofunmi, her eyes were clear, almost relieved. "I told you," she said softly. "God gave you back to me. Now it's just us." The funeral was quick. Tofunmi sat in silence as the sand hit the caskets. No one asked why he didn't cry. When they returned to Ikorodu, Mama Fola cleaned the house from top to bottom. She polished her son's framed picture and put it beside Tofunmi's bed. She began calling him by a new name, Fola Jr. At night, the lights stayed off longer. Her footsteps came softer, the prayers grew stranger, and the door never stayed locked. Tofunmi was 16 when he met Teniola. She had bright eyes and a voice that danced through the church choir like light through stained glass. She was kind, always first to greet the shy boy who barely spoke. He never told her about the shadows he lived with, only that he stayed with his grandmother in Ikorodu and liked to draw. She laughed at his sketches of the church drummer and once said, "I like boys who see the world differently." For the first time in years, Tofunmi felt seen not as Mama Fola's shadow, but as himself. They started sitting together at youth meetings. One Sunday, she touched his arm during prayer, and he thought his chest would break open from the feeling. But Mama Fola noticed. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She waited. Then one night, after service, she stood at the gate in silence. "I saw the way you looked at her," she said. Tofunmi swallowed. "She's just a friend." "She will ruin everything," Mama Fola said, her voice sharp as cold iron. "And if you ever touch her, ever, I will go to the church and tell them all what you are." He tried to walk past her. She blocked the door. "You think they'll believe you? That you're a victim?" Her voice dropped. "You're dirty, Tofunmi, and if you leave me, I'll make sure everyone knows." The next Sunday, Teniola waited for him outside. He walked past without a word. That night, he burned all his sketches of her. Mama Fola made him white rice with stew, extra meat. She sat close to him in the parlor, too close. He didn't eat. He just stared at the wall and counted the cracks again. The years passed. Tofunmi stopped drawing. He stopped singing in church. He spoke only when spoken to. Mama Fola said he was a good boy now. He was 21 when he met Amarachi, sharp-tongued, stylish, a business student who liked men who were quiet but observant. They met at a printing shop in Yaba where he worked part-time. She teased him at first, then she started texting. He let her in, slowly, carefully. One night while they sat on a bench in front of her hostel, he told her everything. Not the details, just enough. She was silent for a long time, then she held his hand. "I'm not judging you," she said, "but you need to be careful. People won't understand." He nodded. The next week she asked for N20,000, for data and transport, she said. The week after she asked for more. When he hesitated, she showed him a screenshot of their old WhatsApp chat. "I'll just post this on Twitter," she said with a shrug. "You know how people are. They won't ask if it was your fault. They'll just call you sick." He paid, then paid again. Each time she smiled and kissed his cheek, but her eyes were cold. He tried to end it. She laughed. "You think you can shame me before I shame you?" Back in Ikorodu, Mama Fola didn't ask where he went anymore. She just watched, always watching. At night, he lay on his mat, staring at the ceiling cracks. Some had faded, others had deepened. He whispered to himself now, short prayers, long silences. He wasn't sure which parts of him were still his, or if anything had ever been. Tofunmi met Angela at a youth outreach in Oberlende. She wasn't loud or dramatic. She listened more than she spoke. Her kindness wasn't performance, it was steady, like breath. She noticed he always sat at the back of the group. She brought him bottled water during breaks. One day she asked, "Why do you look like you're always holding your breath?" He didn't answer, but he came back the next week, and the one after. She never pushed, just sat beside him, sometimes in silence. One Saturday, during Bible study, they were paired for prayer. She held his hands gently. Her voice didn't shake. "God, heal what we can't see." His chest tightened. He blinked fast, but the tears came anyway. After everyone left, she waited. When he finally spoke, the words came out cracked and slow. She listened, really listened. Then she looked at him and said, "You need to tell your truth, loud, with your chest." "I'll be ruined," he whispered. "You're already drowning," she replied. "Truth won't kill you. Silence is the one that bites deepest." That night, he sat alone on the church steps with his sketchpad for the first time in years. He drew a lion, not roaring, just breathing. The next Sunday, during testimony, he raised his hand. The mic felt heavy. His voice broke on the second sentence, but he kept going. He told them everything. The hall was silent, then someone sobbed, then another. By the end, the youth pastor stood and prayed without words. And Angela took his hand in hers, firm, unshaken. That was the moment Tofunmi realized he wasn't the secret, he was the survivor. The video of his testimony spread quickly, first in church WhatsApp groups, then on Instagram. Some comments were cruel, calling him dramatic or cursed, but most were kind. Some were heartbreaking. "I thought I was the only one. I was 10. You're brave." People called, messaged, prayed. Tofunmi didn't respond to most. He stayed off his phone for days. But Mama Fola heard. She stormed into the church compound the following Sunday. Her wrapper flared like wings, her voice cracked as she screamed, "Lies, that boy is possessed, I raised him with my life." People watched, no one stopped her. Then, as she turned to leave, her sandals slipped on the wet tiles outside. She hit the pavement hard, the crowd gasped, someone rushed forward. She pushed them away. She limped out of the compound alone. Days later, news came. Mama Fola had collapsed at Ketu Market, hit her head trying to cross the road during heavy rain. She died before they reached the hospital. Tofunmi didn't cry. He attended the burial, stood behind the mourners, and left before the last shovel of sand. Back home, he found one of her old wrappers tucked into the wardrobe. He folded it and placed it at the back of the cupboard. That night, he slept for the first time with his door closed, fully closed. And no footsteps came in the dark. 1 year later, Tofunmi stood under a white canopy in a small compound in Aja. The air smelled of fried rice, perfume, and fresh hope. Angela, in a flowing peach dress, smiled at him from across the aisle. They didn't have a large wedding, just a few friends, church members, and a handful of neighbors who remembered his story and respected his silence. When the officiating pastor asked, "Do you take her?" his voice didn't shake. After the vows, as guests clapped and ululated, he looked up at the sky, not to escape, but to give thanks. That evening, back in their small one-bedroom flat, he brought out a new sketch pad. The first page held a single drawing. A young boy sitting in the dark, reaching toward light spilling through a crack in the wall. He called it Becoming. Amarachi had stopped texting long ago. After the video, her threats turned to silence. She vanished. Tofunmi sometimes thought of Teniola, of what could have been, but he didn't regret it. Some people come to teach us who we were, others, who we are. And Mama Fola? He no longer hated her, he no longer carried her. Some nights, he and Angela sat under the stars, fingers entwined. When she rested her head on his shoulder, he would close his eyes and breathe deeply. Not to hold anything in, but to finally let everything go.